Hello. In this guide you will learn how to make a weapon mod for L4D2. I will replace the Chrome shotgun with a Higgins Model 583.25 bolt action shotgun. Now since this is a bolt action shotgun, I obviously need to create animations, so this is perfect for a guide. Once you have the model that you want, you must decide which weapon or item you want to replace. When you made your decision, the next step is to open the pack01dir.vpk file and retrieve all the model files for view and world models. All weapon models are in the main game folder's pack01, but there are exceptions, like the M60, Golf Club and the Gatling. The scripts for most weapons are in the DLC2 folder, but there are updated versions on newer folders. It is generally a good idea to first check the update folder, then the DLC3 and then the DLC2, just in case the game gets updated again and the scripts for some reason change. Create a folder which will later be your add-on. Put the script in there and leave it for now. We will use it for the HUD icon later. If you want to add sounds, I would recommend making the sound a separate add-on. Otherwise people cannot use their preferred sound mod with your gun and will either not use the mod or use the modified version of someone else who uploaded the gun without the sound. Decompile the models. Now you can open Blender. Open the save file you downloaded from the description and first import the decompiled world model. Then import your model. Now you can position and scale your gun to fit the original gun. The most important parts are that the grip and trigger is about the same size and in the same location. Some models just do not fit in the world model, either because it has a foregrip that would clip into the hands, or the entire thing just does not fit at all. Sometimes you just have to bite the bullet. Drag the Mesh object into the World Model Armature object and hit with empty groups. This will parent the mesh to the armature and have all bones listed in the Vertex Group tab, which is required for rigging. Once the size and the location seems to fit, apply the location and scale. After applying the location and scale, you can begin to rig your model. The easiest way to find out what bones the original is rigged to is by selecting the original gun, enter weight paint mode, and click through the vertex group listing until you see mesh that turns red. Rig your model to whatever bone that is. Most likely the weapon bone. Sometimes, like the gas can or pipe bomb, or in this case my shotgun, use a different bone. Just make sure your model uses the same. Select your mesh, enter edit mode, and select the vertices that should be rigged to that bone. Then, in the vertex group window, select the same bone on your mesh and hit assign, while the value is set to 1. If you have a rifle with a magazine, you should be aware that there is a magazine bone. This bone is only moved during the reload animation. However, when porting the L4D1 cast into L4D2, Valve broke the animations so that the magazine bone of the rifles in third person is moved backwards, but only for the L4D2 cast. So, if you rig your rifle, you have to decide between rigging the magazine to the magazine bone and have a broken Worldmodel on the L4D2 cast, but with a moving magazine for the L4D2 cast during reload. Or just rig the magazine to the weapon bone as well, which causes the magazine to not move during reload, but at least it will not be broken for the L4D2 cast. Apparently, the community seems to prefer having a static magazine that never moves over one that is in the wrong spot. Once the model is rigged, look at the Material tab of your model and look at what names the materials have. You have the chance of changing the names there if you would like to. The names listed there will be the VMT file name. The VMT file is Valve's material, which determines the texture shader and optional features like transparency, glowiness and other junk. Now that the model is the correct size, rigged, and with material names that make sense, you may still need to fix up the smoothing. Some parts may need to be sharp but look smooth, or should be smooth when they look sharp. If something needs to be changed, head over to the Modifier tab of your model and apply the Edge Split modifier. In Edit mode of your weapon, you can now select edges, then hit Ctrl and E to bring up a list of options. Select Mark Sharp to make a smooth edge sharper. You can select Clear Sharp to undo what you've done. For weapons, you could make your own collision mesh. Those will only work on single-player servers and will be forced onto players if the server host uses the mod. The decision is up to you. I will make one because I know for guns it does not matter that much. Once the smoothing is fixed and you are sure everything else is okay, you can export the model. Select the model in the outliner and give it a sensical name, like W_mygun. That way you know it's the Worldmodel. Unlike any other model in Blender, the export tool for Source Engine is in the Scene Property tab. Select the folder that has the QC file you got from the decompiled model. Select if you want to use SMD or DMX files. It doesn't matter for a gun. DMX files can keep the hard edges and the face flex data of models. SMD cannot. For a gun, SMD will do just fine. If you make animations, you might have a problem if you mix a DMX model with SMD animations, so just stick to SMD. Then click the Export button. You will be asked what you want to export, the entire scene or the selected mesh. Now that we have an exported SMD file, we can edit the QC file. We will change the body group line. I prefer to just use the $model line instead, because it requires less space. The first name after $model is the mesh name in the game. I use my name like a watermark. The second one is the SMD or DMX file name. Use W_mygun or whatever name you picked. For testing purposes, we will also duplicate and change the model name line so that we can look at it in Half-Life Model Viewer later. We need to do that to test the gun and move the attachments where they should be. Simply duplicate the line and add 2 slashes in front of one. The 2 slashes will turn the line into a comment so that they will be ignored during compile. The duplicated one needs to be changed, otherwise HLMV will not load the model. Simply add a custom into the model name line as a folder name, preferably right at the start. Scroll down to the CD Materials line. This line determines where the textures are at. You can change the location. I like to use my name for a folder and give it a subfolder of the model. So Mr. Funreal/Higgins in my case. The last slash is required. Make sure it is there. Add a $, mostly opaque if you don't have one. It will help with sorting translucent textures. Maybe your model doesn't have translucency, but it is still nice to have it. There will also be a sequence line. Simply use your SMD file you used for that one as well. Once the required changes are made, save the QC file. If you haven't already, create a new folder next to the DLC folders of the game so that all mod files will be in there. This is very useful for keeping apart custom content from the original one. I made a guide for that already. You can look at that one and follow it before you proceed. Link for this is in the description. Once you have that new folder and Crowbar is set up to compile to that folder, drop your QC file onto Crowbar and compile the model into that new mods folder. Then open up HLMV, load the model and have a look. It will most likely not have any textures yet. Now you can convert your textures from whatever format they are in into VTF and create VMF files. You can open VTFedit and select Tools, Convert Folder to convert a folder full of textures into VTF files. Once you've got your VTF files, you also need a VMT file. The VMT file name should match with the one that were used in the Materials tab of Blender. To get VMT files, you can either copy the one from the original gun or make your own. I am super lazy for this guide, so I will just copy the VMT file from another mod I made to save time. Just change the VMT name and the texture location within the VMT file and you're done. Then you can back out of the soon to be add-on folder so that you can see the materials folder. Copy the materials folder into the mods folder in the game files and refresh the model in HLMV. The textures may not look very nice as of now. You will have to play around with the shaders in the VMT file until they look nicer for you. More important right now is that the attachments fit. Go to the Attachments tab and put the attachments into the right place. I also made a guide for that. Link is in the description as well. You can now load a survivor in HLMV. You may have to extract the models/survivor folder from the pack01dir VPK file into the main game files so that HLMV will even open the folder. That's just a bug with the software. Once a survivor model is loaded, select File, Load Weapon, and search for the world model you have compiled. Make sure it fits into the hands. You need to load the proper animation for this. If the gun fits into the hands and the attachments are done, you made your world model. You can edit the QC file again and swap the commenting on the model name line and compile your model once again, but now it will be compiled to actually replace the proper model in the game. After you compiled the model, you can get the compiled files and put them into the pre-made add-on folder. Once you put the files into the add-on folder, you could now add a add-on info.txt file, which is used to list the mod in the add-on menu. Give the add-on a name, your own name as the author, and don't bother about the description. You can now pack it into a VPK file. Either drag it onto the vpk.exe or have this right-click shortcut like I do. I also made a guide on how to do the right-click shortcut. Link for this is also in the description. Once you get the VPK file, you can put it into your game's add-on folder, load the game and test the world model. Once you made sure the world model works, you can continue with the view model. In Blender, select any armature. Go to File, Import, SMD, select the decompiled view model of your gun and make sure that the Bone Append mode settings are set to Create New Armature, otherwise it will merge the decompiled armature with the new one you selected. The model you imported is only used to check the scale. Delete the imported armature, we will not need it. Rotate the mesh of the imported original view model so that it points forward, like the gun already in my armature. Duplicate the mesh that you have exported as a world model. Rename it to v_mygun. Scale it to fit the mesh of the newly imported original view model, just in case the size is different. Once the scale fits, you can delete the imported decompiled original view model. Now you can position your mesh to be in the same space of the model from my armature. Don't bother about the grips or anything lining up perfectly. You just want it to be in the general location. Now in pose mode of the view armature, you can move the weapon bone to be somewhere on the model. Then move the trigger into place and so on. Now you can start rigging your gun to the bones. Start by doing the small parts, like trigger bone, the bolt bone, and so on. Use up all the original bones first, even if the names make no sense in the animation. As long as something needs to be rigged, rig it to any available bone. If you run out of bones, make new ones. You can then apply the pose as a rest pose in the armature so that the bones stay there. Once you have rigged every small piece, select all already rigged mesh, invert the selection, which will select everything that is not rigged yet. Rig all that is left to the weapon bone. You can test your rig by going into the armature pose mode, selecting any bone and move it. If a part of the model stretches out, you have a vertex that shares two bones. If a piece only moves about halfway or just not like the bone, then this piece is rigged to two bones at the same time. If you have a magazine, or in my case a shell for the reload animation, you must decide between keeping the original parenting for the magazine bone or redoing them. Usually the magazine bone is a child of the weapon bone and thus follows the gun, which is annoying in reload animating, because if you move the gun in one hand, the magazine or shell in the other hand will also move, which is a pain to work with. If the magazine bone is not a child of the weapon bone, you can move the gun around in any way, shape or form you want, and the magazine bone in the other hand will not move a bit. I heavily suggest to make the magazine bone have the same parent as the gun bone so that the magazine can be moved independently. If everything is rigged fine, export the model as it is right now. Save the Blender file, then make a new save called idle. For this, make a new folder where your QC file is and name that folder Animation Saves. This will be used for the idle animation later on. Now, technically, we can start animating. But before we jump into the animating, here's a bunch of information you need to know. The ViewModel animations need to have the same frame rate and amount of frames as the original animations. I have made a guide on Steam for L4D2 that lists all ViewModel animations for all the items with the amount of frames and frame rate. Link is also in the description. When animating, you are allowed to edit the amount of frames, as long as you also increase the frame rate accordingly. For example, if the original animation is 100 frames at 30 FPS, then 200 frames at 60 FPS works. You increase both by 100%. 150 frames and 45 FPS works as well. You increase both by 50%. And 10 frames at 3 FPS works as well, because you divide both by 10. The only exception are looped animations, like the idle, helping hand loop and item loop. The looped animations do not rely on how long they are, because they can be stopped at any time by the player. I prefer to make my looped animations 120 frames long, but keep the 30 FPS frame rate. By the way, the frame rate does not decide at what frame rate the game will run on your screen. It only determines how many frames of animation will be played at what the game perceives to be a second. Anyways, the armature that I have made has an IK rig. If you move the hands in pose mode, the arms will follow. It also has a camera. You unfortunately cannot move the camera. All you can do is rotate it. In the camera settings tab, you can create your own presets for a 54 field of view and a 85 field of view. The settings for these are shown on the screen. With this camera setting, you can not only animate in actual first-person mode, but you will also be able to see what is on the screen and what isn't. This is very useful because there is one animation I have for a AK-47 mod where a secondary magazine is seen on the right side in higher field of view. So make sure that nothing is on the screen where it isn't supposed to be on the screen. Towards the bottom of the 3D view is a button that toggles automatic recording of keyframes. It looks like the recording button of a camera. That way, any movement you do will immediately be saved as a frame, so that changing a frame will not delete everything you have done. If you make a rifle with a magazine bone that has its own parent, give it a bone constraint so that for most animations it will be set up to act as a child for the gun bone. You can undo that in the reload animation. Select the magazine bone, head over to the bone constraint and then add the child of constraint. Select the armature and then the weapon bone. Press set inverse. Any movement on the weapon bone will also now happen on the magazine. I have a shotgun with shells. The shells will be outside of view most of the time anyways, so I don't need it. Go into camera view mode on your preferred field of view by selecting the camera and hit Ctrl and numpad 0. Anytime you press numpad 0, you go into and out of camera mode. Once in camera mode, position the gun bone so that the gun looks good on your screen. Do that in the armature pose mode. Once the gun sits in a location you like, pose the right hand to the gun so it holds the grip. You can use the arm models as a guide. Once the right hand location is nice, add the child of bone constraint to the weapon bone so that the hand bone acts as a parent of the gun. Any hand movement will automatically move the gun, which will also automatically move the magazine, if you have a magazine. Move the left hand to hold the gun and then make the left hand IK bone a child of the weapon bone as well by using the constraints. Now, moving the right hand IK bone will move the right hand, the gun, the magazine if you have one, and the left hand all in one. Now in pose mode, select all bones and press I. On the bottom of the new window, you will see whole character. Press it. This will save the current location of all bones in the entire scene to where they are right now. In the outliner under the armature, you will see an animation box appear. If you click on the little plus, it will reveal an animation. That name there will be the name of the exported animation. Call it idle. We now have a one single frame animation called idle. Export that one animation for now and do a test compile of the gun. Since we need to check if the position is okay in HLMV, I'm doing the attachment. Open the viewmodel QC file and duplicate the model name line again. Do the whole CD materials line change and model line like we did on the Worldmodel. Scroll down to the sequence lines and comment out the entire block. You can do that by using a slash and asterisk. If you put a asterisk slash, everything between the first slash asterisk and the asterisk slash will be one comment. For the test animation, we can create a simple sequence line. Write $ sequence in quotation marks idle in quotation marks anims/idle. Anims/ will be the subfolder where your QC file is. Exporting animations in Blender will automatically push everything into a anims folder. After adding the test sequence, compile the model for HLMV and test it. The only animation the gun has right now is the one frame animation you compiled into it. You can now move the attachments on the gun. Once you have done the attachments, swap out the commenting on the model name line so that you compile the model for the game and test it in the game as well. If everything works as it should, go back in Blender and make the idle animation. Make sure it can loop, because it is a looped idle animation. I like to make my idle animation 120 frames long. The first and the last frame must be the same to make sure it actually loops. Once you are satisfied with your idle animation, save the Blender file and export the animation. After exporting the idle animation, save a new Blender save in the animation saves folder and call it run. Then you can animate a running animation. Keep the first frame and delete everything else. Since this is also looped, make sure it loops. Export the run animation as well. Save the Blender file once more and then create a new save under the name Lookposes. Keep the first ever frame again. This is still the same frame as the first frame of your idle animation. Underneath the 3D view, set the frame count to 2 and duplicate the frame 2 more times. Now you can decide how the guns should be positioned when you look up and down. Have the first frame be a looking down pose. The second frame will stay the normal idle frame, while the third frame will be a looking up pose. In both looking down and looking up, you still want the gun to point away from you because you are still aiming. Once done, export it as Lookposes. Now we have 3 animations so far: idle, running, and Lookposes. Those will be blended into one by the QC file. Open the ViewModel QC file and replace the existing Lookposes lines, if you have any, with these 4 new lines. Now you see a line that starts with animation. We had a sequence earlier. Animation lines allow you to give any SMD or DMX file a name and settings, like FPS and the loop function. The sequence lines can then use the animation with the settings you have already given it. Animation lines are usually used to blend animations together. That is exactly what we are doing with the idle animation. The sequence lines are the actual animations that you will see in the game. The names may be a little bit confusing to have one thing called animation and one sequence, but that is just the way it is. The animation lines called look are for the Lookposes. The first is the look down animation. The anims/Lookposes determines what SMD file is used. The following frames 00 means it is the frame 0 of that SMD. The other two lines are look mid and look up, the same SMD file, but as you can see they are frame 1 and 2. The next block is the run animation, at least in my case. Just add your own run animation into the SMD field. The next block will be the Lookpose sequence. We shouldn't really do much with that. The next block after that will be the idle animation. Inside of this you can again see sequence, then in quotation mark idle and idle layer, and then the next thing could either be anims/idle.smd, or since we already have a idle animation line, you can use the animation name a_idle instead of the SMD file, since you can reference animations in the sequences. It's kind of hard to understand at first, but you will get the hang of it. You can compile this for the game and run and look around. If done right, the run and look pose animation will be overlaid onto your gun. When it is working, you can just go ahead and animate all other animations. Remember to use the correct amount of frames, which I listed in my linked guide. Luckily for you, the idle animation is the only animation where you blend anything. When you are animating, you will see that a lot of sequences have a event 5004, then a number, quotation marks, for example shotgun load shell. This is a sound event. If you want to position your own sound events, you can simply load the animation in HLMV, use the frame scrubber to go to whatever frame you think a sound event should be loaded, and then just use that frame number after the 5004 part of the event. You can even change the sound event, like in my case I have a bolt action shotgun. I'm using the sound event of the AWP bolt back and bolt forward. In the downloadable file you have a list of all possible events. The next thing is a HUD image. Open Blender where your gun model is stored. Build a camera that has a orthographic view directly onto the side of the gun and render out the picture of the gun without textures and without the background. These settings can be changed in the shading section of the Render tab. Unselect textures and set the alpha to transparency. You can also decide whether or not you want to have shadows. This will just add some shading to the picture, which will make the icon look a bit more interesting in the game. Then render a picture of the weapon. After rendering, export the render in the Images, Save as Image window. Copy the fitting VMT and VTF files from the downloaded file into the materials/VGUI/HUD folder of your add-on and give them a name which is unique to your mod. I like to use my name and the gun name together. Open the script in your add-on folder and the prefab text file. Copy the correct lines from the prefab text file into your add-on script and replace the texture name. Open up the Photoshop save file which I provided and scale your gun picture into the right spot. If you rendered a picture with shadows, add a white background behind the rendered picture and then duplicate the render and make it white. Otherwise, add a black background to your already full white render. The white gun and black background will serve as an alpha channel for the HUD image. Combine the full white gun and the black background and paste it into the alpha channel. When exporting to VTF, make sure the visible RGB layer is either just white or has the shadow render in front of the white background. Save this as a BGRA8888 format. This format does not compress the image. Now we have the HUD icon finished and we can move over to the Soundmod. You should make the Soundmod a separate add-on. People get upset when they cannot use their favorite sound with any gun. Collect the sound files from the game if you haven't already. Put them in your Soundmod add-on folder and open them in Audacity. Drop your custom sound in the Audacity session as well. Your sound must have the exact same length as the original. Cut it shorter or add silence if you have to. When your sound has the exact same length, you can copy the waveform and paste it over the original. Doing that will give your sound the same hertz. If the hertz does not match, then your audio might end up slower or sound deeper. Delete the custom imported track from the Audacity session once you pasted your edited sound over the original. Then export the sound as a wave sound file and replace the original. The same goes for the incendiary sound, except that you will also have a fire sound effect within the audio. You can get a fire sound from an audio bank, from the internet or from the game files. Where you get it from does not matter as long as it sounds nice. Export the incendiary sound as well, and then you can pack up this mod. Now we have a gun mod with our own animations, a HUD image and a separate sound mod. Load the game and play around with your mod. This was my all-including guide on creating weapon mods for Left 4 Dead 2. Good luck making your own.